Good morning, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of LiR Confidential on lirmedia.tv. And our usual email pertains, it's info@lirmedia.tv. And also subscribe to our channel, the red button on the bottom right-hand side, and tell all your friends about us. I'm absolutely delighted to have in the studio this morning, remotely speaking, our special guest, Liam Irwin. Welcome along, Liam, to the show.
Thank you very much, Pat. Greetings from sunny West Limerick.
And I'm out here in Shannontown, not too far away. But you grew up in Fina, Liam, and what was that experience like? Would you call it more positive, I suppose, experience growing up at the time? Different times, indeed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But like when you compare Ireland today with the Ireland of the 1950s that I grew up in, it's another world. And I suppose in some ways we were nearly closer to the 19th century even then. I grew up on a farm, and you hand milked cows and you made hay. When I was younger, even baling hadn't started. It was a kind of a farming life that hadn't changed for 100 years, I suppose, really.
Yeah. For bringing up the big, huge cocks of hay.
Exactly, yes.
And pulling them up to the float. Was that the thing? I remember helping out as well. I grew up. So it was tough work, but it was honest work, it was hard work, and it was healthy.
It was. Again, maybe we all look back a bit nostalgically and remember all the good times of it, but yes, and I mean, you had a great cooperation amongst the neighbours, because before tractors and mechanization, all the neighbours, a lovely word, cord, from the Irish cower, they helped each other. And I have wonderful memories of those days in the meadows, and meeting and having stories from the older workmen and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I look back very positively at it all. Yeah.
Fantastic. And the old trashing days, I remember as a small for the old trashing. It was a huge social occasion for the parish as well as anything else,
Absolutely. Yeah. The social dimension of it, and the way it's changed for farmers now, who very often are confined to the cab of a tractor and whatever, and the creameries have gone, so the social aspect of meeting all their neighbours and having a chat at the creamery and all the rest of it, there's something has been lost, I think, with the developments.
A lot has been lost, Liam. There's no doubt about that. As you said, the old creameries where you catch up on the nose and I mean, that's the big tanker coming in now and fill up and go away.
Absolutely.
I know, and agriculture itself is under severe pressure now to innovate or die. Is that the word for them?
Yes, absolutely. And all this emphasis on expansion, which is still going on, and you would wonder with climate change and all the environmental pressures and whatever, what's going to happen with all the huge investment that younger farmers have made to fund that expansion and whatever. There are possibly worrying signs ahead for farming in Ireland, definitely.
Well, there are just huge challenges, but Liam, you were awarded in secondary school in St. Munchin's College. How did you find all of that experience? When did you go in there? 11 or 12, was it, or something like that?
Yeah, I was 12, I suppose, just 12 going on 13. Again, people today might think it rather strange, but I actually loved boarding school, and have absolutely very fond memories of St. Munchin's College, much smaller, of course, in those days. And I suppose first of all, there was the alternative. If I hadn't gone to boarding school, I'd have been cycling 3 or 4 miles to school in Drumculliher, I suppose. Again, I had one brother, but he spent a lot of time with my grandmother. So I sort of grew up in a sense on my own, so that I found the companionship in boarding school something very, very, very pleasant. And certainly the regime that was in St. Munchin's in those days was compared to some of the horrific stories you hear from other people in different kind of schools and whatever. We were treated very well, I think.
I know, and sometimes, I mean, I'm not dismissing the horrific crimes that were committed against young boys and girls. I'm not going to dismiss that, but it was, we have to say, Liam, it was a minority.
Yeah.
Minority. And that's not to diminish or dismiss it, but we have to say that. I was briefly in boarding school as well, to all priests and very positive. But then, was it in St. Munchin's? I suppose a lot of these interesting subjects can be down to the teacher who will instill a sense of enthusiasm and love for a particular subject. And in secondary school, did you find yourself drawn to any particular subjects, or that you found that you could come to the topic easily, you know, that you had an actual love for it? I'm thinking of
I suppose history, which I finished up earning my livelihood for, I had always enjoyed that. I liked English as well, and in those days, we did, in St. Munchin's, we did both Latin and Greek, and they were 2 subjects that I found, I suppose, easy to do in one sense. And if you find a subject easy, then you tend to like it. It was things like maths and science that didn't particularly attract me, but I mean, I didn't wake up at the age of 14 and 15 and said, I want to be a historian or anything like that. But that came later.
With that Latin and Greek, of course, you had your first Punic War, second Punic War, and all of that, and Carthage and all of that. I remember that as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a lot of it, wasn't it? That the classical history and that sort of thing was exciting. Yeah.
It broadened your understanding of the world, so to speak, you know, and lads, you know, Hannibal and all of that. That's fantastic. Of course, Latin, all the roots of Latin are peppered in the English language. I don't have to tell you that. So it was easy. Even look at you now, but I found Latin an easy subject as well, because you know, a lot of the roots, we were familiar with it without knowing it at the time, you know. Anyway.
Yes, indeed.
So then you progressed after that to my own neck of the woods, down to Cork City, down to UCC.
Yeah, but not exactly directly. When I left school, I was kind of keen to break away and be independent and whatever. So I was briefly on the staff of Allied Irish Bank, which took me to Galway, which was a city I enjoyed living in. But after a couple of years, I decided I did want to go to college, and then decided to go to UCC, which again was a very pleasant experience, I have to say. Not least, of course, living in Cork.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying for all of us. You haven't been to Cork yet. You're welcome to go down anytime. Liam is 2 weeks a Corkman as well, lad, so he just let me into that secret before we started the program. So he can go down anytime he likes. But Did you come across, was he there at that time in the history department, Donegal Corán?
He was indeed. He had quite a strong influence on me, and I took one of his specialist courses. When you look back on it now, there were four of us in the class or seminar, I suppose you would call it, and I mean, he had a wicked sense of humor, but such a marvelous scholar alongside of it, and you know, a down-to-earth rural Kerryman at the same time. He was this fascinating mixture of you know, top-class scholar in a very difficult area of Old Irish and early Irish studies, and at the same time somebody who'd go for a drink and, you know, discuss anything and everything from rural life to politics and whatever. Fascinating man.
I came across him late because as a mature student, I did a diploma that took him into a couple of the modules. So that's how I came across him. But we met because we were middle-aged guys, so we went to the pub a few times with him. But my God, he was fantastic. Just a fantastic character. Of course, you had Johnny Murphy there as well.
Eventually, when I finished my primary degree and was deciding to continue with history, because I was particularly keen on the 17th century, it was John A. who became my thesis supervisor. I think people forget that his original research was actually in the 17th century before he became well known as a 20th century historian and pundit and politician and everything else.
Good singer as well, Liam, a fine singer.
Absolutely, and prepared to pick up a song at the drop of a hat and go 2 or 3 songs if necessary. Indeed,
Johnny is still there. 91, I think he is now. You know.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Of course, I mean, with people like Donegal and Johnny and sure, I mean, really, you had such two fantastic characters, but academics, well respected, well regarded, and written many books between them as well. You know.
Yes, so absolutely, indeed, and Professor Joe Lee came along during my time there as well and whatever. So yeah, yes, I was lucky because having been in the bank in Galway, I had toyed with the idea of going to UCG, but I was, with all due respect to them, I was very glad and perhaps lucky that I hit UCC at that particular time. Yeah.
Then after eventually getting out the other end, so to speak, in UCC. What did you do after that, Liam?
I was extremely lucky because once I'd finished my research and you know, I had gone to college, I suppose, with the idea of being a teacher, and I had.
What area did you cover for that, for the masters, the research you referred to? What?
Yes, again, 17th century, later 17th century, from post-Cromwellian Ireland up to the Jacobite period. I was looking basically at politics and religion in that period, and focusing on a particular man called Roger Boyle, the Earl of Orrery, the man who founded the town of Charleville. So that was the area that I had specialized in.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. After that, then where did you?
Yeah, I was, as I say, extremely lucky. I had done the HDIP, and I assumed I would be searching around for a teaching job, and you know, then as now, depending on vacancies and whatever. But as it happened, the job came up in Mary Immaculate College, as for a lecturer in history there. And for some reason, I charmed the nuns and whatever, and they took me in, and that was the story of the rest of my life until I retired, really.
And they showed you the door. I'm only joking, but I mean, it must be. I mean, I can't imagine myself, but it must be fantastic in one way. And I said this to a few people, to be lecturing and teaching in something that you actually love yourself. You know, that you actually like. And I don't mean that you're lecturing something that they're, but you know, sometimes you do get sidetracked into delivering lectures on other related topics. You know, but you were there. You were there all your career then in Mary I. So it's,
My entire career, the only break as such was I spent a year lecturing in the University of the United States. But apart from that, I was again very lucky in that the basically the nun who was the head of history when I went there, she decided after a relatively short time that she didn't want the responsibility of being head of the department anymore. So again, relatively young and having not been there that long, I became the head of the history department. And somebody told me when I retired, I had some kind of record as being the longest head of a history department in any third level in Ireland. I'm not sure if that's true, but
we won't be
having got my feet under the table, they were unable to give me.
no shifting, Liam, and we won't be disingenuously and say nobody wanted the job. I mean, I know from what you're saying now in your voice that you really tell me about the changing attitudes and the changing. You met many first year students down through your career. Is there a different kind of challenge now to these people coming into universities? I mean, I sat in now, my friend that was a part-time lecturer there, I sat in at the back of her class a few times, on the back of the room. And would you say, I mean, are they prepared for third level as much as you would like them to be?
The short answer, I suppose, is no, and I don't think it's their fault.
No.
But the nature of second level education, the nature of the leaving cert, and the need to get the points and whatever, it almost works against any kind of critical or independent thinking, really. And it's been shown again and again that studying to a formula and getting grinds and studying for the exam does unfortunately produce the results. And then suddenly with high points and whatever, they're released into third level where they are obliged to fall back on their own resources. Nobody's going to tell them what to study when or whatever, and they have to get used to a way of approaching their academic life that they haven't been prepared for. And as you say, that puts great pressure on. When I went to Mary Immaculate first, all my students were trainee primary teachers, that they were all doing the preparing for the B.Ed. And that produced, I think, a certain kind of student. In many ways, students that were very easy to deal with, because even in their first year, they went into the schools and became trainee teachers themselves, and they suddenly saw everything from that point of view. And then, but on the other hand, then it was a very, I suppose you might say, inward-looking narrowly focused approach to everything. And then later on, when we linked up first with UCC and then with the University of Limerick, and Mary Immaculate was able to offer a BA, you had this change. Mary Immaculate, of course, was changing anyway. The nuns were no longer in control, and but Mary Immaculate opened up then with a greater range of students, and the focus on primary school, while continuing to be very important, that was I suppose diluted somewhat.
Yeah, and do you think, I mean, I don't know, we had a discussion on another program here a couple of months back about students, particularly young teachers. They leave secondary school, they go straight into college, and then they're in the classroom the next day when they come out of college. Really, they haven't had time from the age of 12 till 23 to draw their breath or to see the world or perspective like that, except they're very well, you get the odd individuals. So what we were suggesting here, as when everybody after completing their leaving cert, male and female, should do 2 years national service.
Yeah, I certainly agree that the common procedure now is to go from sitting in desks to suddenly standing before students in desks without any experience of life. And I found that in my own life, having gone to work in the bank and then gone back to college and then become a teacher. So I agree. Whether it's national service or whether there are other avenues of, internships or social work or even travel, I think it wouldn't matter what they did for a couple of years. Just experiencing life in whatever way might suit it would have its benefits, definitely, yeah.
You're listening to LiR Confidential here on LiR Media with my special guest, Liam Irwin, and a local institution in Limerick. Liam Irwin is now. He wouldn't admit it himself, but he is. Because we were mentioning to a few people we were doing this today, and they are really looking forward to listening to it. So I better cock myself on and speak about something that I may know about as well, But now your whole area, one of the areas, Liam, I know you touched it there earlier on. You're very busy. I suppose you've been as busy as ever since you never retire, as we said in the start. Like myself, I was in the civil service and I had to go out the door at 65. I had no choice. That's it. Good luck. But anyway, Patrick Sarsfield and the whole issue about Patrick Sarsfield and the old phone books. They were great. They're not issued anymore now, because I was trying to find the old phone book from Limerick to find out is there many Sarsfields, the name itself, left around Limerick, County Limerick. The name is still there, though, is it?
The name is still there. We tend to forget, of course, that Patrick Sarsfield was not a Limerick man and had in one way only a limited experience in Limerick.
Where was he from?
Good question. We're not entirely sure where he was born. It was either in Lucan in County Dublin, where he took the title eventually of Earl of Lucan, but it may also have been in Kildare because his father had been dispossessed by the Cromwellians, and they initially got back their estate in Kildare first. It took much longer to get back the lands in Lucan, so he's probably a Kildare man. Would be the best guess. There are a lot of detail about Sarsfield's life that we're very unaware of. That doesn't mean that he didn't have branches of the family in both Clare, Limerick and Cork. And of course his sister married one of the Cork branch of the Sarsfields, who curiously enough had the title Viscount Kilmallock because they had some property in Kilmallock. So he did have plenty connections with Munster.
I know down around Cork there's well the old TB hospital, which was
Sarsfields Court, yes.
And Meyer, you know.
Indeed, yeah. So if the attempt of Limerick Civic Trust and my former colleague Loic Guillaume, who are trying to find Sarsfield's remains and bring them back, I think there could be a holy mother of a row about where his bones should finish up.
I mean, there is now and again. I mean, was the grave apparently where he's buried in France located? Well, there was a grave located. I'm just trying to remember from reading about it. There are a couple of soldiers buried there, and they think one of them could have been Patrick Sarsfield.
Yeah.
Conclusion about that, Liam?
Yeah, you see, he didn't die on the battlefield as I think we tend to be taught at school. He really died from probably infection of his wound a few days later in a nearby town called Huy, which is now actually in Belgium. And he was buried nearby. Now, the exact location of his grave wasn't clear, but Louis Guillaume, who's the head of French in Mary, he has gone through quite recently documents in the town that survived there, which seem to show that Sarsfield was buried within the church, not in the graveyard nearby, but within the church. And there's a kind of a fairly clear indication of where it might be. And as it happens, that area has not been built on. It's actually part of the back garden of a house. So that's why there's such optimism that some kind of archaeological investigation might just, that they wouldn't be digging randomly, that they would have a focused, identified area to go looking for. And apparently there are direct descendants, not of Sarsfield himself, but of the Cork branch of the family. And DNA is going to be taken from those people to match if any bones do turn up. So it's not quite a needle in a haystack, but I don't think it's a done deal yet, shall we say.
Now, there's not really ifs to this conversation, of course, like everything in history, there's not really if or what if. We'll assume they'll identify the remains as Patrick Sarsfield. We'll give them that, so through DNA. I suppose the next conundrum then would be to repatriate him over to Ireland. Now, will he be buried in Lucan or Kildare or Cork or Limerick? That would be the next problem then, wouldn't it?
There we are. So I think in one way we're storing up trouble for ourselves, and that happens anyway. Maybe if they find enough bones, we can give one bone to Lucan and one to Limerick and one to Cork and whatever.
It's no meaning to throw the dog a bone without diminishing.
I don't know. I'd be unpopular for saying this, but possibly the decent thing would be to erect a suitable monument over his grave and let his bones rest in peace. But anyway, we'll see.
Where he is now, if it's proved, I suppose that would be a good compromise, I think, Liam, because it would be huge. I couldn't, anyway, we don't know that.
We don't.
And that whole area of Sarsfield and the Treaty of Limerick and the penal laws, an awful lot of people. I mean, when we were growing up, our history finished in 1916. My year. Nothing happened after 1916. I suppose because, like you, I grew up in the 50s, and of course, an awful lot of the teachers, or the older teachers, people forget they were still connected to the Civil War. And
Mm.
it depended on which side they were on. And that's a human thing. I'm not making criticism. So if you
Mm.
were on the treaty side or the anti-treaty side, that would be your history. Do you know what I mean? So
Indeed, yeah.
yeah, people forget that.
Mhm.
I mean, they were genuine people and genuine human beings, but I mean, obviously, you know, it's wearing away now. At last, 100 years later, but nevertheless, there's still areas of the country, as you well know yourself, where it is. You would point out, or that fella was on that side, or that woman was on that side, or that family were. It's still in the countryside. You'd still come across that whole era. But the celebrations, I know COVID-19 obviously impinged and inflicted, but the recent celebration, I think, above, was it two weeks ago now, left to me terrible injustice to the memory, I think, myself, Liam.
Which was that?
The celebration recently in Kilmainham, they
Oh
had
yes, yeah, 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 yeah.
the
It
lack,
is. Yeah.
yeah, the lack of acknowledgement of the sacrifice of the people. And
Mm.
you cannot have a general thing for everything. You have to acknowledge the events and the event and the characters. That's the way I see it myself.
Mm.
I don't
I
know.
think I think the most successful commemorations have not been these kind of sanitized government directed things, but actually all the local
Yes, yes,
commemorations that have developed. People who are reclaiming, their own local ambush or their own local event,
that's
and have been, coming together to celebrate it and to extol both their local heroes and their own areas. And it's all been done, as far as I can see, in a very friendly, collaborative, non-divisive way. And I think that's the most hopeful sign of the whole decade of centenaries and whatever, the
right.
way local communities have taken ownership of their own history, really.
Of course, next year, 1922, is coming up quickly, and as we know from the Civil War, that was huge amount of people killed in that year on our
Mm,
side.
mm,
I think the
mm.
biggest people that were killed, I think, were killed in 1922.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, I mean, many people, I suppose, worry that the Civil War will be the most difficult. But again, I think what I've seen of local celebrations I know. I mean, there was RIC men shot in Drumculloher, who was from County Roscommon. He was killed in 1920, and I notice where he's from, there was some local commemoration there of War of Independence, IRA activity, and they incorporated and included this man, Thomas Bridges, as part of the whole community celebration. So I think we can worry too much maybe sometimes about and
Everybody, yeah, everybody was. Now, obviously, of course, it depends on the event sometimes, I mean, they were complete. We don't want to get bogged down in battles events, but there was ferocious killing, I would say, on both sides.
Oh yes, yeah, and I suppose civil war is always the most bitter and the most difficult to come to terms with. Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad. It's so sad. My mother, from the other side of the family, it's so sad when people just close themselves off
Yeah.
for years and years till they're old people, which is sad in a way. But look, we weren't there. We can only hope that we learn our lessons. Eventually, it took us a long time to learn our lessons as a country, but I mean, You're involved as well, Liam. I'm looking down here. I don't know how you get much time to yourself in the Thomond Archaeological Society.
Yeah, that's, I suppose, in a way, it's been a huge part of my life, really. I joined the society when I came to Mary Immaculate in 1976, 77. And I've been very much involved with it ever since. I mean, it's been going in Limerick since 1892, when it was founded as the Limerick Field Club, and went through various changes and whatever, but it's been, dedicated to the history of not just Limerick itself, Limerick City and County, but also Clare and North Tipperary. That's why it's called the Thomond Archaeological and Historical Society. Began purely as an archaeological society, and then we added on historical to it to reflect its broader range of interests. So over the years, I've been secretary of it and president of it, and I also edit the kind of history journal that we produce, which is the North Munster Antiquarian Journal. And we organise lectures from September to April. Yes. When life is normal, at least. And then we have outings during the summer. And we've just been able to have outdoor outings again. I led one myself to Kilmallock about 2 weeks ago. And we've had Sunday afternoon and evening outings so far. Part of our thing usually is to go on coach outings as well, but that's not going to be possible, I suppose, for some time yet. But it's been as I say, an important part of my life, and part of my thinking as well, that when I did start in academic life, that I didn't want it to be cut off from the broader range of promoting history amongst people who are not specialists and whatever. And but there is, I think yourself, a huge interest out there amongst people, particularly as people get older. People are always pointing out that the age profile of societies like ours is often grey-haired and whatever. But I think it's very often when people get to, I don't know, their 40s or something, and their families might be reared and whatever, that they have the time and gradually develop a deeper interest in history. So I think all societies will continue to survive, because we will continue to recruit people who at particular stage of their lives then want to pursue their interests in history and in archaeology.
Mm-hmm. And also, Liam, I see you're involved in the Limerick Georgian Society.
Yeah, I was president and whatever of that for a while as well. Yeah, it links in, of course, because Georgian society gets a bad press at times, and it is maybe a bit unfortunately named. Was it Kevin Boland, for people who remember Kevin Boland, talked about melted arrows or whatever. And for a long time it was dominated by Desmond Guinness and Desmond Fitzgerald, the Knight of Glyn, very sincerely committed people, but who obviously kind of reinforced a certain image of what the Georgian society was like. But in terms of Limerick, it's such important role to try and preserve what we have, not just purely Georgian, but because we have such a rich heritage of uniquely Georgian terraces in Limerick, then they certainly need somebody to speak up for them. But also, a wider appreciation of architecture.
Who would be responsible for those who'd be actually directly is responsible
I suppose the short answer is probably nobody. Depends who they're owned by, and private property is protected by the Constitution, so it is often down to the owners, and it's obviously a burden for many owners of properties like that in terms of the difficulty of maintaining them and the difficulty of doing any kind of repairs. First of all, because it's very expensive, and secondly, of course, because of the restrictions that have to be placed on what you can do for them. Now, the City Council have a record of protected structures, but that kind of legislative protection can often, when it comes down to it, account for nothing. You sometimes can get cynical when you see promotion of Limerick and publicity, and one of the main features is the glorious Georgian heritage. And then when you ask, well, where's the money or support or whatever for it, it frequently is not there. But
you're right, yeah. I walk around Limerick a lot, and it's still shocking to me, and Limerick is no stranger of the awful dereliction around the city centre. That is still prevalent today. I don't have to tell you about it. It never ceases to amaze me. We have full-time Limerick County Council with a huge staff. We have an elected councillors, 40 of them or something, 40 councillors, and are all their eyes closed. Do they not walk around the town? And
I know.
If they do, are they blind?
Will the directly elected mayor solve all our problems?
No, it won't. I think that's a well, there won't be any directly elected mayor this year anyway. It's
no.
And
I mean, from what we hear, they're already trying to take away some of the powers that were promised to him or her. So,
I mean, we are a nation. We are a young nation, 100 years old, dominated by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael philosophy for 100 years. They're not going to give up their power easily. Let's be honest about that. Irrespective of party politics, they're not going to give up any power like that. They don't need. That's our history. Are they elected here? I don't know. Except we get a charismatic person. I don't know. I can't think of anyone at the moment. Apart from yourself, who could be me. Would you be interested in going for it, Liam?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, I think I suppose, as you say, we need somebody dynamic and whatever. But if the powers and the finances and whatever, and you mentioned politicians, but also there's a great entrenched group of civil servants and administrative officials and whatever, and they love their power too. So it's difficult.
I was in the civil service myself, and it's changing somewhat, but change. Well, you know yourself. You worked in academia. Change comes, but it's slow. Change does come. There's an inevitability about some things, but change is not something that comes along. It's a struggle. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a struggle. My special guest here on LiR Confidential on LiR Media is Liam Irwin. Delighted to have you, Liam, and email info@lirmedia.tv for all your comments, and press the red button to subscribe to our channel. You also were busy. You wrote a book on Limerick Diocese. How did you find that, Liam?
It was a very interesting experience to do. I was invited or commissioned to actually do it, and it was a combination really of a kind of narrative history of the diocese, but then profiles of each of the 60-odd parishes in the diocese. And, it was very interesting to go around and visit them all, look at all the different churches and the holy wells and the kind of stories of them. So I enjoyed doing it very much indeed.
Is that book still available, Liam?
It's funny. The diocese commissioned and essentially paid for it, and then for some reason decided that it would not be sold publicly. So it was never given to O'Mahony's or any of the outlets really. Copies of it were basically given to every parish priest with the kind of instruction that they were supposed to sell it locally. Some of whom did, and some of whom, didn't feel that this was something they had to do. It's for ordinary people who weren't involved very much in, we'll say, their local parishes or whatever, were probably quite unaware of it. And would it be I would imagine that Limerick Diocesan Office still have copies of it if anybody is interested. But as I say, it popped up occasionally in second-hand bookshops, but it was never really commercially available.
Yeah, and would it be in would it be in the universities, for instance?
Yeah, the libraries would have purchased a copy, I suppose. Yeah, I haven't really checked that really, but
I know the library, so be able to tell me, But before we finish up, there's a current issue going on, Liam, about Limerick Castle. Now we have Blarney Castle, we have Dublin Castle. We have Clontarf Castle. Why can't we just have Limerick Castle?
Well, this is what I've been saying, with support, but with fairly spirited opposition as well. And I fully respect people who don't want change or don't like change or whatever. As you say, every famous castle in Ireland, from the ones you've listed, and not to mention Bunratty and Kilkenny and whatever, are all known by their location. And particularly, apart from branding, if you like, which is so important now, I think it's unfortunate that we call our wonderful castle after such a dreadful king. First of all, who never came to Limerick and whose main interest in Limerick was conquest and granting away the land of local native Irish as part of the beginning of the Norman conquest. You'll never find any place in England named after King John, because he's universally reviled as one of the worst of the English kings, which
most of them were anyway, in my opinion.
The other point is that historically it was never known as King John's Castle. From the very beginning, in all of the historic sources, it's either Limerick Castle or sometimes the King's Castle or the Queen's Castle. When it became an army barracks in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was called the Castle Barracks, even when the houses were built there. And I know there are relatives of people who lived when the houses were in the castle, feeling nostalgic about it. But actually, as far as I can see, they always said they lived in the Castle Barracks, not in King John's Castle. Now, people, of course, are used to it, and the rebranding, shall we say, which I and others have been suggesting, doesn't mean that people won't continue to call it King John's Castle, and that's fine. I still talk about Todd's myself.
I wonder, Liam, it's just called Oliver Cromwell's Castle. Would they be Would they
There
be
we
in,
are.
in
Yeah.
just
There we are. And I know some people say, oh, you shouldn't be changing any names. But then we'd still have Georgia Street rather than O'Connell Street, and Nelson Street rather than Parnell Street. So I think some name changes are sensible and worth making. And anyway, it's my view.
yeah,
Now that Limerick City Council and County Council are going to be taking over the running of the castle, people have said, "Oh, that'd be a waste of money." It wouldn't cost very much. It'd be really just a question of changing basic signage, and I presume they'd be changing publicity materials anyway. Now that the corporation are taking responsibility for it. So I think it would be a relatively simple and, in my view, a sensible thing to do.
would they not have a? Would they not have a side? Would they not have a? What am I call it? Where every citizen, everyone living in Limerick City and County Limerick would have a vote on it.
You could certainly do that. Yeah.
Personally, I'd be in favour of Limerick Castle because I think it's ideally placed to. You instantly know Limerick Castle. You instantly know where it is. You know, that's only my opinion for what it's worth. You know.
Well, sure. That should solve it with somebody with your media power and influence.
Yeah. But I think so, and I think that it shouldn't be left down to a handful of people to decide these things. That's what drives people mad half the time. You know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. The more you consult with people, definitely is always the best way to go. Yeah.
It is indeed, Liam, and of course, well, are they going to? Is there a motion? I didn't read up on it now. Is there a motion down in Limerick Council to change it, or is it just an idea floated?
Yeah, I think the new mayor, Councillor Butler, I think he plans to raise it, whether by formal motion or otherwise, I'm not sure. But certainly, he's on the record of as saying that he would like to have it considered, and I understand he himself would be in favour of it.
That would be good. That would be good. But look, we'll wait and see. And hopefully, they don't leave it rumble on forever and not come to something about it. You know, because I mean, it's like many things around Limerick. I mean, it's instantly associated with the city, and as I said, it could give a whole new life or impetus to the city as well. Now we'll just touch on a few things before we finish up, Liam. The way, I mean, I know when I was going to school, obviously it wasn't the late 50s, early 60s, but an awful lot of the approach to subjects and to, particularly with history, I think history has been dumbed down myself somewhat, which, I mean, history to me is as important as our language, so to speak. They both go hand in hand, and culture and all of that. And I don't know what was wrong with people, you know. Now, I don't have much time. That's my own personal opinion. It's not to mention the opinion of LiR Media, of the social sciences myself. I think most of those subjects are a waste of time anyway, you know. They're just, anyway. But history to myself, history to me, sorry lads, I apologise beforehand, but look, that's my own opinion. And something like history should be up there with English, with mathematics, with science, with biology, all those, what I call those major subjects. Do you think so, Liam?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, you know, as you say, it's very worrying what the attempt to downgrade it for the junior certificate, which was proposed relatively recently. Now, I appreciate teachers and schools and whatever. There are now so many pressures, and every social ill and every problem in the country, the answer is, oh, the schools should sort it out and whatever. So, you know, I can see all the competing pressures, but as you say, history should not be seen as some kind of optional extra, or some kind of thing to fill in when more important subjects aren't there. And, you know, in many ways, there's a contradiction, because in terms of you know, TV programs, radio programs, books, history has never been more popular. And you know, every time there's a good, well-made TV history series, it attracts major interest. So, like talking about Sarsfield and the wild geese, like we were, you talk to young people now, and they have a very hazy, if any knowledge at all of that. Whereas, previous generations knew all about Sarsfield and the Battle of Fontenoy and, all of these important part of our past. And also, you need to forget that, not forget that. Very entertaining and very thrilling stories that makes it attractive and excellent material for lessons and everything as well, and back into primary school too.
Yeah, you're dead right there, Liam, because I think myself that local history can be taught with very little effort. And what I mean by that is this, that every class in national school once a week should be brought around their local area and say, did you know that so-and-so lived in that house? Did you know that there was a battle fought just down the road there, lads? And do you know this plaque is up? And do you know the simple information like that to engender a sense of appreciation of their history locally. That's where it starts, and then it can be progressed from there. I think it should be as important as going out in the fresh air. And when you go out, you look around.
And place names.
Liam, before we wrap up, I mean, we were talking there before the issues came up about the way history was dumbed down, but I think rightly, I'll have to agree with you. I listened to the history program on News Talk, do an excellent history program, dip in and out. Is it Patrick Gagan, is it? I think
that's Gagan, yes, yeah.
Yeah, he does it. And I think they have a decent listenership to that on a regular basis, and which is no mean feat. I remember, what's his name in the old days? You'd remember him. Andy O'Mahony used to do lovely history programs. Remember Andy
That's right. Absolutely, yeah.
Way back when he was a beautiful, fabulous broadcaster. People can look up the archives with Andy, but Miles Duncan, of course, did a history series there fairly recently in RTE. They didn't keep it up. I don't know why. And they're our public service broadcaster. Surely that would be one of the functions of our public service broadcaster, to commission these history programs locally. I mean, I don't know really myself. I don't know, Liam.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful about history now? Do you ever stroll back into Mary now? Would you be left in there now again if you walked in now?
Yeah, I'm always welcome. Yeah, I mean, it's still an extremely popular subject at third level. So the numbers taking history, not just in Mary I, but in all of the universities, is very high. And as we were saying earlier, as a popular subject in terms of books and programs and whatever, it's extremely popular as well. I would be. I'm always an optimist anyway, but I would be optimistic about it. Yeah.
In our own case here on LiR Media, we have a regular history program done by the Limerick Historical Society with Todd Dillon and the lads, and that's proved very popular, So not surprising to me now, but surprising to other people. But I'm not surprised that it's popular, because they're talking about the history of outside your window, so to speak, and all around you and all around us. They cover national issues as well, but it's really one of our most popular programs on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and both Tom and Tony have such wonderful local knowledge then as well, so that it enhances it. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and it's great that people like that share that knowledge with people, and that they have a forum on LiR to actually do that. So that's great. Yeah.
We have a lot more people lining up behind us. We're moving premises at the moment. We just got the keys of it during the week, so we'll have the studio full and functional then, and hopefully we'll be able to physically have people inside in the studio rather than what we're doing now. But the lads, they interviewed Johnny Adams recently as well, Tom and Tony, you know, which was very popular. Of course, Johnny now will be an elder statesman. He'd be semi-retired, you know. But that's interesting. But as you said, Liam, we will keep the flag flying for history anyway on this channel, and we will certainly, whether you like it or not, we'll certainly have you back again for a further chat, and we'll go more in depth into we just wanted to give people an overview of who you are and where you're coming from, and the next time we'll have a more in-depth chat about the books, certainly about the history of the diocese, because I know an awful lot of interest in that, particularly where I live in County Clare as well, you know, and local history is thriving thanks to people like you and all around the place, you know, that keep the flag flying. But Liam, for this edition of LiR Confidential, we were delighted to have you, and we hope to have you back again in the near future. And we wish you the very best of health. And until we meet again, Liam, from this edition of LiR Confidential, goodbye and God bless.
Thank you very much, Pat. Bye.